The year is 1972. The series Kung Fu hits American television screens. The story of a Shaolin monk named Kwai Chang Caine, who wanders the Wild West, spreading the wisdom of the East and dispensing justice with his feet and fists. Critics are delighted. Viewers are glued to their screens. Ratings are off the charts. Confirmed for the lead role is David Carradine, a tall, lanky white man with a soft gaze and absolutely zero experience in martial arts. He couldn't even throw a proper kick. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Hong Kong, sat the man who came up with this idea. A man who had breathed martial arts since the age of 4, who could land a strike faster than a camera could capture, who had walked into Warner Brothers studios with his script, with his vision, with his dream, and was rejected. His name was Bruce Lee, and he was told straight to his face, an Asian cannot be the star of American television. Eyes too slanted, accent too thick. The audience won't buy it. This is not just a story about a stolen idea. This is the story of how 1970s Hollywood looked a genius in the eye and chose mediocrity, because mediocrity had the right skin color. But to understand how deeply this injustice wounded Bruce Lee, one must go back to the very beginning, to the boy who was born in the hour of the dragon, in the year of the dragon, and lived a life that proved far too short for his talent. Li Junfan came into the world on November 27, 1940, in San Francisco, at the Chinese hospital, while his father, the Cantonese opera actor Li Hoi Chuen, was touring the United States with his troupe. An amusing detail: Bruce was born in America. He was a U.S. citizen by birthright. Remember this fact, because 28 years later, this very circumstance would make Hollywood's rejection particularly cynical. They didn't reject a foreigner. They rejected an American. The family returned to Hong Kong when Bruce was just 3 months old. And this is where his true formation began. The Hong Kong of the 40s was Japanese-occupied territory, chaos, poverty, post-war ruin. His father earned money in cinema, but it was barely enough. The streets were hard. Bruce grew up hard. By age 13, he was getting into street fights so regularly that his mother, Grace Ho, began to seriously fear for his life. Not because he was losing, but because he was winning. In 1950s, Hong Kong's street victories had consequences. Gangs did not forgive humiliation. It was fear for her son that led Bruce to the man who changed everything, Master Ip Man, the legend of the Wing Chun style. Bruce was 13 when he began training, and here's what distinguished him from thousands of other students. He didn't just learn forms, he asked questions. Why exactly this way? What if we do it otherwise? What if we combine? Ip Man later said that Bruce was the most difficult student he had ever seen, and the most gifted. The boy did not accept tradition on faith. He took it apart and reassembled it. But the streets wouldn't let go. In April 1959, after yet another fight, this time with the son of a powerful triad member, his parents made a decision. 18-year-old Bruce was put on a ship and sent back to America, to San Francisco, the country where he was born, but which he did not know at all. In his pocket, he had $100. $100 in hands that moved faster than thought. He moved to Seattle, got a job as a waiter in a restaurant owned by a family friend, and enrolled in school to get his diploma. In parallel, he began teaching Kung Fu, right in the parks, right in parking lots, for $5 a session. His students were thrilled. They had never seen anything like it. Such speed, such precision, such an understanding of the human body as a weapon. Bruce wasn't just teaching, he was creating his own system. He took elements of Wing Chun, added Western boxing, fencing, wrestling, philosophy, and honed something entirely new. Later, he would call it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. But before that name became a legend, it was just the idea of a strange Chinese guy from Seattle who believed he could change the world through movement. In 1964, the moment occurred that pushed Bruce out of the shadows, the martial arts tournament in Long Beach, California. Ed Parker, the founder of American Kenpo, organized an international championship and invited Bruce to demonstrate his skills. Bruce was 23. He stepped out before a hall full of veterans, masters, and skeptics, and showed them something that silenced everyone. The 1-inch punch. 1 inch of distance, and his partner flew back several meters. The hall went numb. Sitting in the audience was a man named Jay Sebring, a Hollywood hairstylist and friend to the stars. Sebring was so impressed that he told producer William Dozier about Bruce. Dozier was just looking for an Asian actor for a new TV series. One phone call, and Bruce Lee got his first real role in Hollywood. But here begins the part of the story that explains everything that happens next. The role was Kato, the driver and assistant to the Green Hornet in the eponymous series of 1966. Think about it. A man who was inventing his own combat system, a philosopher, a master, a teacher, got the role of a driver, an assistant, a man in a mask standing in the background. And even in this role, a role that by the writer's design was meant to be decorative, Bruce Lee managed to steal the show. His fight scenes were so fast that the cameraman had to slow down the film just so viewers could see his movements at all. Van Williams, who played the Green Hornet himself, later admitted with bitter irony, "For every fan letter addressed to me, there were 10 for Bruce." The series lasted 1 season, 26 episodes. ABC canceled it due to low ratings. But here's what's interesting. In Hong Kong, that same series aired under the title The Kato Show. Not The Green Hornet. The Kato Show. The Asian audience instantly recognized what American bosses refused to see: a real star. After the cancellation of The Green Hornet, Bruce found himself in limbo. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. He was too talented for bit parts, but too Asian for leading ones. They called him to play stereotypical villains with exaggerated accents, silent servants, caricatured kung fu masters with long beards. Bruce refused. He took individual episodes, appearances in Batman, in Ironside, in Longstreet. But each of these roles was tiny. A guest visit. Showed up, demonstrated a couple of strikes, left. Next. And then Bruce did something radical. He decided not to wait for Hollywood to offer him a seat at the table. He decided to build his own table. In the late 60s, Bruce began developing a concept for a TV series that was supposed to overturn America's perception of the East. The idea was simultaneously simple and revolutionary. A Shaolin warrior monk travels through the American Wild West in search of his half-brother. He carries with him a philosophy of nonviolence. But when forced, he fights. And he fights in a way American television had never seen. It was a Western. It was a drama. It was martial arts. It was philosophy. All in one. Bruce called his project The Warrior. He wrote down his ideas. He fleshed out the characters. He planned the season arcs. And then he went where everyone who wants to make a TV show in America goes, to Warner Brothers Studios. And here, he crossed paths with 2 men who would play a key role in this story. Producers Fred Weintraub and Tom Kuhn. Weintraub would later become one of Bruce's most loyal supporters. But Kuhn was working with another writer. His name was Ed Spielman. And this is where the story starts turning into a detective novel. According to the official Warner Brothers version, the idea for the series Kung Fu belonged to Ed Spielman, who wrote the original script back in 1969 about a Shaolin monk traveling the Wild West. According to the version of the Lee family and numerous witnesses, Bruce came to the studio with his warrior idea earlier. He presented the concept to the Warner Brothers executives. He sat in offices, drew on the whiteboard, explained the philosophy, demonstrated the movements. And then they told him, "Thank you, we'll think about it." And they thought about it so well that, after some time, a series appeared with a suspiciously similar concept, but with a different title and a different actor in the lead role. Linda Lee, Bruce's wife, described that moment like this: Bruce was crushed. He knew the idea had been taken. He knew he had been replaced, and he knew why. Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, was even more blunt in an interview many years later. My father was told that the American audience would not accept an Asian as the lead hero of a primetime show. These were not rumors. These were words said to his face. But the most ironic part, the most absurdly, painfully ironic part, was who they chose as the replacement. David Carradine, the son of famous actor John Carradine. Tall, slow, with a sleepy gaze, and a way of moving as if he had just woken up from a long afternoon nap. No experience in martial arts, not a single day of training, not a single strike backed by any real technique. Producer Jerry Thorpe later explained the choice like this: "We needed an actor, not a fighter. Carradine could convey the character's inner world." Let's translate from Hollywood to human. We needed a white guy who could pretend to be Asian, because a real Asian scared our sponsors. Carradine played a Shaolin monk. Shaolin monk. A man who didn't know the difference between Wing Chun and Winn-Dixie portrayed a martial arts master in prime time on America's largest network. His fight scenes were filmed in slow motion, not for effect as they did with Bruce, but to hide the fact that his movements looked like the pantomime of a tipsy juggler. The series Kung Fu launched in 1972 on ABC. And here's another twist that makes this story even more bitter. It became a hit. A huge hit. The ratings for the first season were magnificent. Critics praised the philosophical depth. Viewers fell in love with the image of the wise wanderer who resolves conflicts not with fists, but with words. But when necessary, can use fists too. The show lasted 3 seasons, from 72 to 75, released 63 episodes, and entered the golden fund of American television. To say this was a blow to Bruce is to say nothing. Imagine, you come with an idea, you are rejected, and then your idea is realized without you, giving the lead role to a man who possesses none of your skills, but possesses the right skin color. And at the same time, everyone pretends that this was how it was intended. But here's what you need to understand about Bruce Lee. This man didn't know how to break. He knew how to explode. Having received a refusal from Hollywood, Bruce did what no one expected. He went back to Hong Kong, not out of despair, out of rage, out of the cold, focused, directed rage of a man who was told, "You aren't good enough," even though he knew he was the best. He signed a contract with the Hong Kong studio Golden Harvest and Raymond Chow, a producer who, unlike the Hollywood bosses, understood that standing before him was not just an actor, but a force of nature. First film, The Big Boss, 1971. The budget was laughable. Filming conditions, hellish. Thailand, heat, mosquitoes, chaos on set. And the result, an absolute box office record in the history of Hong Kong. The film earned over 3 million Hong Kong dollars. For context, the previous record was about 2.5 million. Bruce didn't just break the record, he annihilated it. Second film, Fist of Fury, 1972. The one where Bruce kicks the "No Dogs and Chinese Allowed" sign to pieces at the park entrance in Japanese-occupied Shanghai. This scene became bigger than cinema. It became a symbol of resistance, a symbol of dignity. Every Asian who had ever felt like a second-class citizen saw in that kick their own pain and their own dream. The film broke the record of The Big Boss. Bruce beat his own record, 2 films in a row, and he became the biggest star in Asia. And then, The Way of the Dragon, 1972. A film that Bruce not only starred in, but also wrote, directed, and produced. Full control. The final scene, a duel with Chuck Norris in the Coliseum Arena in Rome. 7 minutes of pure cinematic perfection that are still considered one of the best fight scenes in the history of world cinema. Hollywood watched and started sweating nervously. 3 films, 3 absolute records, hundreds of millions of viewers across Asia. And suddenly it turned out that an Asian on screen is not a problem. It's a gold mine. The Hollywood bosses were simply too blinded by their own prejudices to see it. Warner Brothers, the very same studio that took his idea and gave his role to a white actor, was now knocking on his door. They wanted a joint project. They wanted Bruce. Suddenly, his slanted eyes ceased to be a problem. Suddenly, his accent became charismatic. Suddenly, it turned out that the American audience is ready for an Asian hero. Amazing how quickly racism is cured by the smell of money. The result of this union was a film that changed cinema history forever. Enter the Dragon, 1973. The first Hollywood film with an Asian in the lead role. Budget, $850,000. Pennies by Hollywood standards. Box office, over $400 million worldwide, counting re-releases. Not bad for a guy who was told he wouldn't sell. But here I want you to stop for a second. Forget the numbers. Forget Hollywood. Think about Bruce himself. This man knocked on closed doors for years. He was told, no, you are not the one. You don't fit. Not because of talent, because of his face, because of the shape of his eyes, because of his origin. And he didn't become embittered. He didn't give up. He went to the other side of the planet and built an empire so powerful that the very people who rejected him crawled back to him on their knees. Question: how many people do you know capable of that? Who can turn rejection not into resentment, but into fuel? Enter the Dragon was supposed to be the beginning of a new era. Bruce signed a contract for several films. He had plans for a decade ahead. He intended not just to act, he wanted to direct, produce, create his own studio. He wanted to become a bridge between East and West. Not a symbolic one, a real one. On July 20th, 1973, 6 days before the premiere of Enter the Dragon in Hong Kong, Bruce Lee lay down to rest in the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei. He had a headache. Betty gave him a painkiller pill, Equagesic. Bruce fell asleep and did not wake up. He was 32 years old. 32, an age when most people are just starting to understand what they want from life. By this age, Bruce had managed to reinvent martial arts, create his own philosophical system, star in films watched by hundreds of millions of people, and forever change how the world sees Asia. And he was gone. The official cause of death: cerebral edema, caused by an allergic reaction to a component of the painkiller, a version that many still dispute. There were conspiracy theories: poison, a curse, revenge of the triads. None were proven. But the very fact that so many questions arose around the death of a 32-year-old man in peak physical condition speaks to how impossible this loss seemed. And now, let's return to Kung Fu. Because the story doesn't end with Bruce's death. It becomes even uglier. The series continued to air. David Carradine became famous. His face was on magazine covers. He was invited to talk shows. Journalists asked him about Zen philosophy, about meditation, about martial arts, and he answered as if he knew what he was talking about, as if this was his story, his culture, his mastery. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Carradine once stated in an interview, and this is a documented quote, "I feel that Kwai Chang Caine is me. This character is my essence." A man who couldn't perform a basic front kick without a stunt double claimed that a Shaolin monk was his essence. Somewhere in that moment, the very concept of irony quietly died of an overdose. But here's what is actually the most painful part. Warner Brothers never officially admitted that the idea was stolen from Bruce Lee. Ed Spielman insisted to the end that the concept was his. The studio supported this version. And from a legal standpoint, and Hollywood always thinks legally, not morally, they were protected. Proving the theft of an idea in an industry where thousands of scripts circulate simultaneously is practically impossible. However, there are facts that are hard to ignore. Fred Weintraub, the producer who worked with Bruce and later produced Enter the Dragon, stated openly, "Bruce came to us with an idea. We discussed it, and then the studio made the show without him." Sterling Siliphant, an Oscar-winning screenwriter and Bruce's student in Jeet Kune Do, said the same thing. Matthew Polly, author of the most authoritative biography of Bruce Lee, A Life, spent years researching and concluded that Bruce did indeed present his concept to the studio before Kung Fu went into production. Coincidence? In Hollywood, coincidences of this magnitude do not happen. But there is a nuance here that makes the story even more complex, and I would be dishonest if I skipped it. Some film historians, specifically Rick Dalton from USC, point out that Ed Spielman did indeed submit his script independently, that the idea of an Asian warrior in the Wild West wasn't so unique that one person could claim a monopoly on it. That 1970s, Hollywood was obsessed with Westerns, and the interest in Eastern philosophy after the countercultural revolution of the 60s made such a genre hybridization almost inevitable. Maybe. But here's what no one disputes. Bruce Lee wanted this role. Bruce Lee was perfect for this role. Bruce Lee was born for this role. And he was rejected not because someone else was better. He was rejected because America in the year 1970 could not digest an Asian in the role of a hero. Period. There is an epilogue to this story, and it is both bitter and sweet. In 2015, Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, discovered detailed notes among her father's papers, character sketches, plot lines, philosophical concepts for the series he wanted to create. Not Kung Fu. His original project, Warrior. A story about a Chinese fighter who arrives in San Francisco during the Wild West era and finds himself at the epicenter of Chinatown Tong Wars. Grittier, more realistic, more honest. The very story Bruce carried in his head half a century ago, but which he was not allowed to tell. Shannon took these notes and went to Jonathan Tropper, the showrunner who worked on Banshee for Cinemax. Tropper read Bruce's materials and later recounted, "I held in my hands sheets covered in his handwriting, and I got goosebumps. This man in 1971 saw television as it only became in 2020. He was ahead of the industry by 50 years. Justin Lin joined the project, director of several films in the Fast and Furious franchise and, more importantly, an American of Asian descent for whom Bruce Lee's legacy was not an abstract story from a textbook, but a personal pain. In 2019, 46 years after Bruce's death, the series Warrior finally hit the screens. On Cinemax and later, on HBO Max. In the lead role, Andrew Koji, a British actor of Japanese-Malaysian descent. An Asian, a real martial artist. In every credit, in every promotional material, in every interview, stood the same line, based on an original idea by Bruce Lee. Not Ed Spielman, not Warner Brothers' Bruce Lee. The series received brilliant reviews from critics, 92% on Rotten Tomatoes for the first season. Viewers were delighted by the grit, the authenticity, the fight scenes that finally looked the way Bruce always wanted. Not slow-motion pantomime, but real combat. The show lasted 3 seasons, was saved by fans from cancellation after leaving Cinemax, and gained cult status. Not a ratings monster on the level of Game of Thrones, but something more important. Justice. Belated, incomplete, bitter, but justice. And here I want to draw attention to a detail that is easy to miss, but which brings this whole story full circle. Remember, Bruce was born in San Francisco, an American citizen by birthright. He was denied a role in an American series on American television, in the country that was his homeland. He was sent back to Asia as if he were a guest who had overstayed his welcome. And his series Warrior, the very one that finally hit screens half a century later, tells the story of Chinese immigrants in San Francisco, in the city where Bruce was born. It tells the story of people who were told, "You are strangers here," in the place that was their home. If that isn't poetic justice, I don't know what is. But let's be honest to the end, because this story deserves honesty, not sentimentality. Bruce Lee did not live to see his rematch. He did not see Warrior hit the screens. He did not see Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Donnie Yen, Tony Jaa, and dozens of other Asian stars walk through the doors he kicked down. He did not see the film Everything Everywhere All at Once, with Asians in every main role, win the Oscar for Best Picture in 2023. He did not see Simu Liu become a Marvel superhero in Shang-Chi. He saw nothing of what he himself made possible. He died at 32 in a stranger's apartment with a headache and a painkiller pill, 6 days before the world was finally supposed to see him. And David Carradine? He lived a long career, starred in Tarantino's Kill Bill, again in the role of a martial arts master, again without really knowing how to fight. Died in 2009 in Bangkok, under circumstances we will not discuss here out of respect for the topic of this conversation. But let's say this: his end was not worthy of the pedestal onto which another's talent had placed him. And the studio Warner Brothers? It thrives. It never apologized. It never officially admitted that Bruce Lee was the author of the idea that brought them millions. In Hollywood, apologies are a legal risk, and a legal risk is the only thing feared by an industry that fears neither God nor conscience. Bruce once said a phrase that became one of the most quoted in history: "Be water, my friend. Water can flow or it can crash." Hollywood tried to stop him, and he flowed around the obstacle. Hollywood built a wall, and he crashed through it. Not in his lifetime, not completely, but enough for those who followed him to pass through the breach. There is one thing that gives me no peace. We love to tell stories about justice as if it is inevitable, as if the truth always wins, as if talent always finds a way. But Bruce Lee died without waiting for justice. His daughter had to wait half a century for her father's name to appear in the credits of a project that belonged to him by right. 50 years. A whole human life between the theft and the return. And here's what I want to ask you. We are now living in an era where Hollywood screams about diversity, inclusivity, and equal opportunity on every corner. Studios hire cultural sensitivity consultants. Actors give speeches at the Oscars about the importance of representation. All the right words are spoken. All the right hashtags are placed. But if today, right now, a genius walked into the office of a major studio who didn't fit the format, who looked wrong, spoke wrong, thought wrong, do you really believe the result would be different? Do you really believe that the industry that sold Bruce Lee for ratings and a white actor in makeup has truly changed? Or has it just learned to hide the seams better? Bruce Lee knew the answer. He knew it in 1970, sitting in the Warner Brothers office and looking into the eyes of people who smiled at him while stealing his dream. He knew that the system would not change on its own, that justice does not come to those who wait, that the only way to win is to become so powerful that you cannot be ignored. He became that, and they still tried to ignore him. So the next time you hear some Hollywood producer pontificating about equal opportunity, remember the man who could strike faster than you can blink, who thought deeper than most philosophers, who burned brighter than any star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and who was told, "Sorry, pal, but you have the wrong eyes."